Under the ruins of a walled city, crumbling towers and beams of your light, or something like that. When you hit upon something, as I believe I have, that it doesn't seem that anyone has hit upon before or talked about before or noticed before, or if they have, they haven't come to your attention. And it seems like an important thing to draw attention to, and it's a key by which a lot of things can be understood, a key that unlocks the understanding of a lot of things that otherwise don't really seem that explicable. When that happens to you, as I believe it has happened to me, it's well, how does it feel? I mean, so far I'm a voice shouting in the wilderness, and maybe that's all I'll ever be. But damn it if I don't think my thesis about how the end of the Cold War launched the beginning of the anti-West, anti-male, anti-white movement known variously as political correctness or SJW or SJWism or wokeness, but it being a movement that's proceeded apace for the last 3.5 decades, since the year 1990, essentially, and didn't really exist prior to 1990. Didn't exist with momentum. Sure, there were liberal ideas. There was feminism. There was gay activism. There was black activism. There were other things of that sort. But none of those things gathered the kind of momentum that they did after 1990 and coalesced into what I would call weaponized liberalism. Prior to 1990, liberal ideas existed, but they were isolated. They didn't have vast sums of money and effort and influence from hugely huge and unignorable venues, multimedia conglomerates. Hell, the push. Let's just start with something extremely basic. The push for mass immigration to the West by Western elites, the decision, the consensus that somehow was reached amongst the elites, quote unquote. When I say elites, I always mean that ironically, because I don't acknowledge their eliteness at all. But they are in positions that they are in elite positions, meaning powerful posts for various reasons. But the consensus that was reached that the only way to proceed is to invite the world in and to bring in as many non-whites as possible, to bring in as many people of cultures and backgrounds and that are completely foreign to the heritage of the West. And the heritage of the West, whether you like it or not, is white. Does that mean you can't be of the West and be non-white? I wouldn't go so far as to say that. And I don't even know whether it's a racial thing per se. I'm not willing to die on that hill of genetic determinism. But nevertheless, historically speaking, the West is white, and the idea to the proliferation of buzzwords like diversity and multiculturalism these were words that were not heard in the broader culture before the Cold War ended. The Cold War, for all intents and purposes, ended in 1989. That was when the Soviet Union basically fell. When the Berlin Wall came down, that was the end of the Cold War. The Soviet Union still existed, but it was a ghost of its former self. It had shown that it had lost its power. It had lost its clout. Revolutions were afoot everywhere. I do not think these revolutions were totally spontaneous by any stretch. I think they were helped along with CIA money and influence and so forth. But I don't mourn the end of to be clear, I don't mourn the end of Soviet communism. I think Soviet communism was a bad thing. And a lot of people lived essentially in captivity. Millions of people lived in intensely repressive, tyrannical systems of government. And so it was a good thing when this power fell. But what happened to the Eastern Bloc nations, to the Warsaw Pact nations, the end of the power of Sovietism, as I write in my Substack article, it unleashed a demon in the West. And I don't even know, you can take that figuratively or literally. I don't even know that it's merely figurative. I don't know that it's literal either, although I'm not a disbeliever in the realm of the demonic, whatsoever. I think there's ample evidence for it, but that's a different subject. You can disbelieve in actual demons and still apprehend what I'm saying. And it's no less real, what I'm saying. The demon that is this hostility, this relentless hostility that was unleashed by the very powerful institutions of the Western world against the people of the West. That started with the end of the Cold War. That was concomitant with the end of the Cold War. Correlation is not causation. Fine. And can I find a quote-unquote smoking gun that shows the causation in this case? I can't. Who am I? I'm no insider. I've never dwelt within the corridors of power. I don't know any powerful people. I just notice things sometimes. And I noticed this. And I'm going to devote some attention to this thesis because I think it's a very important. It unlocks the question of okay, it unlocks the seeming enigma that is political correctness or wokeness or whatever. You know, this is an incredibly unpopular movement. The relentless push for diversity, the relentless denigration of whites and of the white man and of masculinity and of heterosexuality and of normality. You know, this is something that people have been sick of for a long, long time. But the thing is, they've always been sick of it. You can go back to 1991 and read articles about political correctness and how people complain that it's gone too far. In 1991, and you know, regardless of the backlash that it inspires, it nevertheless keeps on going. It keeps on being thrust upon us. It keeps getting pushed into into discourses, you know, in powerful and influential places. Even though people are so bloody sick of it now, they roll their eyes when they hear certain words. Or they do, if they don't roll their eyes, they only restrain themselves from doing so because they're attempting to conform, because they want to go along to get along, because, you know, they don't want to get canceled. But nevertheless, it is never been a popular movement. It's never been a grassroots movement. It's never been an organic movement. It's always been something that's been pushed from above. And I think that the fact that it only started, and I mean, maybe some of y'all will have comments, nuh-uh, in 1983 this happened, or whatever. You know, again, I'm not saying there wasn't liberalism. You know, the whole 60s happened, right? And the upheavals of the 60s and the late 60s and early 70s, all the assassinations and what have you. That all happened prior to this, but that's I'm not talking about at that time when those things were happening, the establishment was still co-opting conservative rhetoric for the most part. You know, law and order. Corporate America was not in the least bit woke or politically correct through the 60s or the 70s. It wasn't happening. Yes, there were changes in fashion, and yeah, the people were, it was like, you know, the fashions of the 60s were co-opted, and the trends were co-opted, and, you know, because it was, I mean, and yeah, there probably was an artificiality to those trends as well, as others have suggested, but there was never this massive push from the very top, with billions of dollars behind it, with relentless inexorable and seemingly limitless resources. The kind of resources that are usually poured into things like war by the state, by powerful entities. That's what this is. It's been a kind of warfare. You know, when there's a war, when World War II broke out, massive resources had to be redirected to the war effort, and that had obvious effects on everything and everybody. And the same is true post 1990 in the West. There's been a war that has been waged against the people of the West. And it only started up in earnest after the Cold War ended. Now, why? Well, I have my own thoughts. I've got my thesis on that, but I'm going to keep plumbing the depths of this question. And maybe I'll always just be a voice crying in the wilderness, but I feel that it's something that needs to be done. And here we have increasingly what we're becoming. This bulldozed structure that was once a prosperous shopping mall. Now it's been reduced to this. This is the West. Culturally speaking, this is what we have been reduced to.